Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Line Change, the NHL betting podcast from the Action Network, presented to you by our fine sponsors, BetMGM. My name is Michael Leboff. Joining me, as always, is my co-host and friend, Nick Martin. Nick, we are halfway through, or almost halfway through, maybe. The conference finals. The Panthers up 2-0 on the Hurricanes. Both wins in overtime. The Vegas Golden Knights up 2-0 over the Dallas Stars. Both wins in overtime. So let's just set up real quick what the series lines look like. The Vegas Golden Knights are minus 400 to win the Western Conference. Dallas plus 300 to advance there. The Hurricanes a little longer, plus 330. They lost both their games at home, so that's probably why. The Panthers, team of destiny, minus 425 to win their respective series. So right off the bat, let me ask you this question. My answer is no. I have a different way I'd like to go about it, but do you see any value backing either of these teams on the series line to come back?
Maybe the Hurricanes, but I don't know. I don't think I want to back either of them on the series lines right now,
Okay.
especially because I'm actually thinking that I kind of like two teams in the games in the third games.
Yep.
I think I like Carolina, and we'll go into that more in a bit. And I think I like Dallas, but I think I'd rather just back them in those spots than compared to doing the series line in these situations.
There's one long shot bet I like out there right now. It's a Conn Smythe bet. If it feels like we're betting everybody to win the Conn Smythe, maybe we are. But if you're just out there looking for something fun to bet, I think Jacob Slavin for the Hurricanes is interesting at 80-1. The Hurricanes have spread out the scoring so much in this postseason. The favorite for them, let's say they come back and win, like right now, the betting favorite for them to win the Conn Smythe is Sebastian Aho, and he's 15-1. He's been pretty quiet since the Islanders series. He's got 1 goal in his last 7 games. He's got 2 points in the series, but they lost the first 2 games. After him, it's Freddie Anderson at 20-1. He didn't even play game 2 after the long overtime game 1. And then it's Brent Burns, who I think you can make a case for being interesting as well at 25-1. But I like Slavin because of the score by committee philosophy that the Hurricanes have. It's pretty unlikely that anybody will just run away with this thing. Like Seth Jarvis has 5 goals and 5 assists in 10 games. He's pretty hot, but will he keep it up? Who knows? Will Sebastian Aho get hot again? Perhaps. But Jordan Martinook was the leading scorer for them in round 2, and if they come back, it could be someone from the clouds to do it in round 3. Meanwhile, Slavin, I know he had a rough giveaway or mistake in game 1 in the 4th overtime, but he was really good in rounds 1 and 2. His reputation is really well known around the league as the shutdown guy. If the Hurricanes come back and beat the Panthers, it'll likely be because he turns the faucet off on Matthew Tkachuk and shuts down the Panthers' kind of high-end guys, and he should get a lot of credit. He'll be playing a ton over these next few games. I would imagine as the Hurricanes try to get back in it. So I could see a narrative starting to build around Slavin if Carolina fights its way back, which is unlikely already. So that's why it's a long number. But that is, if you're going to play the Hurricanes, I would consider a bet on Slavin here.
Yeah, I agree. I wrote this up and posted this pre-series, and I couldn't agree more. I think the reason the numbers dropped obviously is they're down 2 games, but I think in terms of the argument that he's their MVP, those are all still in place. So I definitely like this at 80-1 if you're gonna back the Canes. It's a little scary needing the vote on a defenseman, but I do feel like the word is kind of out that everyone knows he's actually their most important piece. So we talked about it before. I think if you asked Brandon, he'd probably say that'd be the last guy he'd want to get injured. And he hasn't had an incredible start to the series, but I agree. If they turn it around, he's kind of been the most consistent force. So I like the thought process here with Slavin. And I mean, even if Anderson gets hot, he's never really been asked to do that much. He had a really good game one, but I don't really think it'll be a thing where we're ever looking at it and saying Carolina's goaltender won them this
Right.
cup. So,
And the last point on this one that I'll make is that on any other team, I think in these playoffs, if Jacob Slavin was on those teams, he wouldn't get he wouldn't have a chance of winning and getting the votes needed because his point totals are going to be muted compared to what we usually see for Conn Smythe. And I think you got to go back to Scott Stevens maybe for a defensive defenseman to win the Conn Smythe. So yeah, it's a long shot for a reason, but that would be it. Let's jump into the games. So game 3 for Carolina and Florida is tomorrow night. That's Monday, 8 o'clock Eastern time. It's basically looking like a pick'em. With the way that this is going to set up, it's the Panthers are -115, Carolina slight underdog -105. The total's 5.5. I think we might see a lot of people back in the draw at +310. We'll see. But I'm with you here. I think that if there's a time to bet Carolina, it's now. It's in game 3. It's not too dissimilar from what we saw in the Leafs series with Panthers. Like, think you can make an argument Florida, whatever, turned game 1 into a coin flip in a pretty effective manner and
I
got the
still think
goaltending.
you're saying like coin flip at best, though.
Yeah, yeah.
And
But I can't say you can't say they stole it. Like that's not like an
no,
outright.
that and they played really good in overtime, I
Yeah,
thought, which eventually was half the game.
game 2 they
But
stole it. Like
yeah,
game 2 was once I saw Carolina was only up 1-0 after the first. I was like, they're in trouble. Like this is what we talk about with the Hurricanes. Like, so it is following that same script basically, and then Florida is an opportunistic bunch, a very confident bunch. They came home against the Leafs. They took advantage of game 3. The team of destiny narrative is now running rampant, and we might even just see it take over and seep into the betting market here. But I think that Carolina is absolutely worth a bet, even if it's like -110, -110.
yeah, I agree. Like Florida's been so opportunistic. They're doing so many things well. They play a great playoff style, all of that. But I still think at the end of the day, the biggest like causations of their success, and I mean, it's obviously playoffs are a different animal than the regular season, but I don't think that they've drastically turned things around, like they should be winning 9 out of 10 games versus playoff teams, which is exactly what they've done. They're winning every single 1-goal game. Bob's at like a +15 goals saved above expected, which is a historic sample for a 10-game run, basically. So I just think at some point their defensive play is going to come to roost a little bit. I don't think this combination of just scoring at exactly the right times and finishing off like such a high amount of your chances while nothing goes in your net, it just doesn't seem very sustainable to me. So they might be able to close out the series, but I think right now we definitely still have a good enough number to take a chance with Carolina here in what's pretty much a do or die spot.
Yeah, the Panthers are it's funny the credit that feel like they're getting credit in the wrong places.
They're getting, it's one of those things like we talk about, there's so much parity in the league and there's so much variance, and those factors are real. Like we're talking about a team that would have not been in the playoffs if Pittsburgh had beaten Chicago as -450 favorites.
And they wouldn't
I
have
still
played the
just,
Bruins in the first round too if like John Tavares didn't score that overtime winner
for
against
sure. Like, and I
which
mean, at that point, it was
team
out
of
of their
destiny.
control. Like
Yeah,
everyone talks about, like all the stuff that they've turned around, but
yeah,
we'd be talking about a failure if Pittsburgh doesn't choke.
yeah,
Which, I mean, credit to them. They've gotten the playoffs and they are playing great. But
yeah.
it's just really interesting comments on like
Keith
the
Kachuk called
margins.
them out for being soft, and I think they're something like 16-2-1 since that, or something, or 16-5-1, including the playoffs, whatever it was. But yeah, I think the Hurricanes are the way to go. You tip your cap if the Panthers beat you here. Pretty surprised that Matthew Kachuk is still the favorite over Sergei
I
Bobrovsky right
agree.
now,
I agree. This is
which
the real.
is getting a little scary.
Yeah, it's kind of a hot topic too, because you always like I was seeing a lot of posts where one person would say like, after like the overtime winners, I think you saw a lot of accounts being like, give him the Conn Smythe now. And then there's always a lot of people commenting, well, Bob's done this and this. I'm
Yeah.
in favor. I actually think Bob, we
Oh,
gave up to Chuck pretty early in the run, but I
yeah.
actually think he's cooled off. Like he was the one who really dragged them into and I mean, he's got the 2 overtime winners, so it's hard to say that. But
Yeah, and
those
he's what is
games,
he like way more than a point per game. The numbers look
yeah.
good, but
But since mid Toronto series, he's been a lot less dominant. It's
yeah,
just they're
yeah.
still winning games,
You
and
know what?
he
You know what? You
gets
know
the
what you're gonna
overtime winners.
see
So
if he does win that Conn Smythe. The highlight everyone's gonna point to is him back checking on that 2-on-1, making like the diving poke check, and
you're right, and I mean everyone's doing like there's the McDavid did that on whatever that night's
yeah,
breakaway was. Eichel had like 4 of those in the last 2 games. Like,
yeah, Eichel's been
I
ridiculous.
mean, yeah, those things are great. I think every star on every team that's going to win a cup is doing
Yeah,
those. It's kind of the reality of it. Which I mean,
he's not
he's
the only one. You just won't see John Tavares do that.
well, he can't skate. So
Let's talk Knights and Stars game 3. Dallas. Uh Yikes. That was a tough way to lose. So they blow a late lead and quickly into overtime. Chandler Stevenson scores to give Vegas a 2-0 lead going back to Dallas. Stars are minus 135, Knights plus 115, and the over under is 5.5. It's funny with these two matchups, both series being 2-0. I feel like you have a pretty good idea of just what the Hurricanes Panthers like first 15 minutes is going to look like. Just like the Hurricanes just stepping on the gas and trying their best to just throw everything they can towards the Panthers zone. And I really don't know how the Stars are going to approach this one at all. And I think they've played a really good game. Game 2 just didn't get the rub of the luck. End up losing in overtime, and here we are. Good news for them is Jason Robertson is starting to find the back of the net. Bad news is, of course, they're giving up goals at very inopportune time and having some defensive breakdowns. So, what do you think?
I like the Stars. I think maybe you're not thrilled to bet them at minus 135 when the games have been close, but it's one of those ones where I'm kind of just happy to put the money in on the Stars and see if Vegas can actually take a 3-0 hold on a series that's been super competitive. And Ettinger's probably got a little more in the tank. I think the Vegas has a more well-rounded defensive core. It's kind of showing. Like I think they have less guys you'd see do what Suter did on the game tying goal, but I think they showed enough that I'm willing to back them at home in this huge game 3 spot. So I like that. And yeah, that game 2, like I think one of my issues with the playoffs is, and I haven't even been like that into seeing the Stars win. I've kind of been, a little less on their train than I think most analysts have been. And even that, like I just feel like I want to see the team that controls play for like 55 minutes win sometimes. Like it feels to me like there's almost been too many of those. And this is where I think like some people who aren't into hockey as much, like what their beef kind of is that it's like a lot of the time you can't control it enough. It feels too luck orientated. And that's kind of what I felt about game 2, where I was just like, I just watched this whole thing and Dallas played so good. And then they just kind of choked it with 2 minutes left. And yeah, but yeah, and then that's the other thing. Like Hill's been solid. He's done just enough. He hasn't given up any softies, which is all that Vegas really needs with how they're playing right now.
Yeah, that's the thing here is so if you were to ask, like I said, I don't really think either team is worth a bet on the series price, but the reason I think Dallas is like tempting in other ways is just I I don't know if Aiden Hill's gonna keep this up, but
It's weird. Like I mean, we're fully aware of how random goaltending can be. And maybe the one thing, like I keep banking on Ettinger to steal some games. He hasn't really been doing that at all. Um, so who knows? But it's insane. Like, do we even know if Ettinger is actually going to be one of these goalies who's actually good for like 5 straight seasons? It's still possible that even that might not be true. So
yep.
it feels like right now it's just very hard to predict these sorts of things. But I'm kind of comfortable that I think Dallas are going to control more of the play and bring a similar effort to great game 2. And if they did that, I'd still be happy to bet them at -130 or -135.
All right. So that's it. Just those 2 games. We'll be back Tuesday night after Stars and Knights to talk about the game 4s, and maybe by that time we'll have some series go on.
I hope so. I
Yeah.
really hope we don't have 2 3-0
Can you
series. The
imagine?
Hurricanes games have been pretty entertaining, I would say, or both games have been pretty decent games, I
Yeah.
would say, for how disinterested some people have been.
Well, I mean, there's a
And
lot
then they
going on
sucked me
there's a lot
in,
going on in Toronto that's distracting everybody. That's the problem, really. Is everybody's
distracting the lay-offs.
yeah.
I'm caught up
It's
in the Calgary news. Big
yeah.
news around here.
And we still haven't heard from Lou Lamoriello yet. His end of the season address. We'll keep waiting. But
Okay.
we'll see everybody in a couple days. Good luck in your game 3 bets. Maybe Jacob Slavin by the next time we talk is scored a hat trick and all of a sudden he's a favorite. For Nick Martin, I'm Michael Leboff. This has been Line Change. Thank you for listening.